Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the first series with of A Piece of Cake, the Green and Baker Show, and that's Abdurrahim Green.
And that is Abdul Haq Baker. And we're both Anthony Green and Anthony Baker.
That's right.
Does your mum still call you Anthony, bro?
I'll call you Anthony, you call me Anthony. I don't mind.
Your mum still call you Anthony?
She does.
Yeah, my mum still calls me Anthony as well. Yeah.
Out of affection. Yeah, out of affection, she calls me Tone.
Tone, yeah. They used to call me Ant. So that's it, Tone and Ant.
Tone and Ant, that's right. Now, let me ask you this, Abdurrahim, though. When your mum used to be upset with you, did she call you Anthony, not Ant?
Yeah, probably, yeah. When it was like, she wanted to tell me off, it's like, Anthony! It wouldn't be Ant, definitely not. Yeah. Ant was a term of affection and endearment. So, like, when it was telling me off, same with my kids, Muhammad is usually Momo or Mo or, but that's when I'm telling you off, it's Muhammad. That's probably not right, is it?
I call my youngest son is Zach. So when he hears me calling him Zachariah, he knows there's a problem. Yeah. So that, I suppose it's generation.
Yeah, the Prophet used to know that when Aisha was upset, right? So when Aisha was upset, I can't remember the hadith, but when she was upset, she'd call the Prophet one thing when she's upset, she would call him by something else. I can't remember what it was, whether she would call him Rasulullah or I can't, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. I don't know what it was. But, so bro, listen, I wanted us to talk today. We were talking about what should we talk about, and I think with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and what happened to can't remember the guy, but
George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. Yeah. George Floyd. Yeah, just shows. You see, if it was a white guy, I'd probably remember his name. You see, but it, the whole thing reminded me. Whenever I think of racism, and like how different people's experiences are. Because, I'm going to be honest with you, Abdul Haq, right? And there's a few questions, like really probing questions I'd like to ask you, like from the point of view of me understanding, right? And there's not many people I feel I could talk to openly about, some of these issues, but I know you're one of them. And because you're a person who has had experiences, I think you can really share some valuable insight and help people like me, But I'm going to take you back to an incident which we both remember. Now, you and me, bro, we used to do a tag team. We used to do an amazing tag team talk, didn't we?
We did.
We travel around. Yeah. So you used to give a talk. What was it called? Your talk that you used to give?
Rap to Reality.
Rap to Reality. Yeah.
That's right.
And I used to give, I can't remember what my talk was about.
But sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
Is there more to life?
Is there more to life? So, but it was really good, bro, because wasn't it? It was this black and white, ebony and ivory together in harmony, right? But alhamdulillah, it was Islam that brought us together, and that was the message that we were giving, isn't it? Is that alhamdulillah, all those divisions were in many ways knocked down. But I think that trip back that's what we wanted to show, how Islam, alhamdulillah, demolished a lot of those things. And I think it really did. But one of the things that I suppose it can never demolish is our different lived experiences, right?
No, that's right.
And, my lived experience is definitely of one of white privilege, no doubt about it. I don't want to go on about it too long and too much,
right?
But because I want to hear from you as well. But I think what brought it home to me is when we were traveling back from a talk that we gave together in Wales. I remember it's like 1:00 in the morning. We just arrived at my house and there was some police at the bottom of my road who had they must have been waiting for anyone to catch anyone. We arrived at 1 a.m. They flashed us and pulled us up right outside my house. And these guys, I remember their faces, like their eyes were blurry, their eyes were bloodshot. They literally must have woken up, saw us drive by and like, oh, there's someone we need to stop.
Yeah.
And they pulled us out of the car or told us to get out and said, okay, where are you going? I said, to my home. And they said, where's that? And I said, right here, because it literally stopped.
It was there.
I said, this is my home here. And they couldn't believe it, And then their car, because they forgot, and it was on the hill, Broomwood Road was on the hill, isn't it? And their police car started to roll down the hill. So these guys took off to run and stop the car. And I joined them. This is the thing, right? I joined them, even though they were being idiots and stopping us for no reason. But I joined them to help the car roll down the hill. And I remember it, man. You just stood there looking down like with such contempt. Yeah. Such contempt, mashallah, in your thought, just, arms crossed, looking down at them, like, with such contempt in your face. And it was afterwards I said, bro, like, what was that about? What was that look? What was that? Why didn't you help? And then you told me, man, you said, yeah, you need to be a kid brought up in, experiencing what I experienced. So tell us something about what you experienced as a kid, as a black kid living in London. South London, at the hands of the police. Share with us what you went through and why my experience is so different from yours.
No, Zaklak Abdurrahim. And one of the things, again, I feel, I want to say I share the same sentiment as you, that I feel that we've always been able to speak even on our journeys. Yeah. And you come from privileged background, and you've highlighted that in the lectures. Even the transparency with your admission at the beginning of this show, as you said, and if he was a white guy, I probably would have remembered him. And I like that frankness and transparency with you, because it's sincerity. I've never felt, and I know many of the brothers from Brixton, we've never felt anti-black racism or anything from you, even despite the fact that you may say, well, I've got a privilege, I'm ignorant of certain things. So I remember that occasion well, and it was clear to me that had I not been in the car with you, had I not been in affluent Clapham, South Clapham Common, with you, you would have never been stopped. You were stopped. We were stopped because I was with you. Maybe they would have seen that, okay, this black guy being in this area in the car with you, I'm your drug dealer. I'm the one with the drugs. I'm doing a deal with you. So for me, the only reason they came to us on that occasion had absolutely nothing to do with you, zero to do with you. It was all to do with me. So when their car started rolling or whatever, in my heart, and it remains like that to an extent today, and I say today because you know that there's some of the accusations that have come over the years, the disdain that I have for them because of what they've put me through and what black people continue to be put through. And I'm not going to put this alongside Islamophobia. I'm talking about the black experience. Now, I used to live, when my mum and dad divorced, I moved to Clapham South. You know Nightingale Lane. That's near where you were. Okay. You know there's a police station right on Nightingale Lane next to Clapham South.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's not
there anymore, but anyway,
it's not there anymore. But you remember the old police station there?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Remember there used to be a white porter cabin outside?
Not really, but I don't remember. But anyway, go on.
You remember the police station? I remember. A white porter cabin outside. It used to be called the Meat House. That's where some of us would get a beating by the police. And how do I know that? Thankfully, alhamdulillah, I got close to it, but it didn't happen. When I was 18, 19, in Tooting Broadway, coming onto the underground, jumped on the tube. As the doors were about to close, I saw 4 officers, big officers. You're taller than me, Abdurrahim. They were taller than you. I'm 5'10". I think you're 5'11", 5'12", 6 foot. And they jumped they came onto the train. When we were on the platform, I saw them coming. The doors open. I saw them looking at me, and I was wondering why. I was just going back to Tooting Bec, where I live, where my mum lives.
Yeah.
They got onto the train. They lifted me off the carriage, and I asked them some of them had me by my arms here, and the other ones had me by my back, and everyone was just looking at me. And I asked them, "What are you doing?" They didn't say anything. They escorted me upstairs, back onto up the escalators. Yeah. 3 of them went. There's a car waiting there, and 3 of them got in and put me in the car at the back as well. I kept quiet by this point because I was thinking, I don't know what's going on. I've been arrested so many times before, assaulted and everything. So what's going to happen now? So then, in Tooting Broadway, there's Tooting Police Station, which is by the Tooting British Railways. That's the nearest station that's there.
Yeah.
They didn't take me there. They drove all the way up. When we got to Clapham South, and they turned left. And I thought, where they take him? Okay, there's Clapham South Police Station, which was open at the time on Nightingale Lane. They parked outside the station. They were talking to each other. I was sitting in the back now, quietly. They offered me a cigarette. Abdurrahim, I didn't smoke at that time, okay? But I took it. I thought, just comply. Yeah. One of them went in, then went to the white porter cabin.
Yeah.
He looked in, he came back, and he said, it's occupied. So they looked at each other, looked at me, waited a few minutes, and said, okay, let's go. So whoever was getting a beating in that porter cabin at the time saved me from getting a beating for no reason. They then went back. They went back to Tooting station at the time. They went back to the station that was nearest to them when they arrested me, threw me into the cell, locked the doors, still no charge, nothing, and they left me for at least an hour and a half. I don't know. I didn't have a watch. I didn't know what the time was. When they released me, I asked, what was this about? They just said, you're free to go. Go. I got home. You know, we didn't have mobile phone, pages, everything like that. Friends who I went to meet afterwards asked, where were you? Because we were supposed to be together. Said, I've got picked up by Babylon, or the feds, the boy dim, as we used to call them again. They said again. I said, yeah. My mum asked me, where were you? She used to worry. She'd be like, when it's late, where were you? What's happened? What? Mum, the police again. So that's one experience, Abdurrahim. That's just one of many. From the age of 13 right the way up through adulthood.
I mean, as you're growing up, you're hearing about your friends, your family, people you know. Like, it's not just about you individually, is it? It's about the people you know and the people you're close to, and everyone experiencing. Like, one of the things that shocked me that I found out, you know, when you know, Floyd was killed and everything erupted, and then some stuff started coming out about here in the UK. And one of the things I heard is that not a single police officer has ever been charged or ever been held to account for the death of a black person in custody in this country. Not one. And quite a few have died.
Yeah.
Not one.
Exactly. But this was the level of institutional racism.
And I heard something about Stephen Lawrence. Yeah, sorry, Rob. Yeah, go on.
Stephen Lawrence. No, but this was, as you said, with Stephen Lawrence, that was a travesty of justice that took decades.
I was on dying.
Yeah.
Left him dying and went to the pub.
Exactly. Ibrahim, another tactic that you'd be unaware of. Do you know how the police used to meter out some of the beatings? Thankfully, I didn't receive them, but some of my friends did. You know what they used to do? You know, you have a mattress in the prison, in the cell, okay? Yeah. You'd be taken into the cell, and they would put you against the wall, and they'd put the mattress upon you so that you, and then when they raining down blows onto the mattress, you are not receiving any of the bruises or fist marks or anything like that. That was a tactic of the 70s and the 80s. So this is what we used to look when we would be arrested. I'll be walking on my mother's road. Okay, I'll be about 50 meters to my mother's road. Police car would stop, pull you up. Where are you going? You would point. I live there. They wouldn't even verify it. Shirt ripped open, hand. If it's female officers, and please let's not miss out on explaining about. They were for me amongst the worst, because if they indicated that you'd been aggressive or said something aggressive like what happened with me, officers backup will come, no questions asked. Truncheons pulled and everything, and they'd be doing all sorts of things. Abdurrahim, hands down the front of your trousers. What are you doing? We're looking for jewelry. I won't keep jewelry down there while we're searching you. And if you could not resist the violence and the abuse from the female officers, and as I said, there are many who've gone through a lot of that, Abdurrahim. So what happened with George Floyd? I'll be honest with you. When that happened, I realized 2 days later, because I hadn't slept properly, and my wife could see it and kids could see it. I'd isolate. But many black people started reliving traumas of what had happened, because that knee on his neck, my biggest case in 1989, 1990, when I was arrested, the officer had his boot on my face and the other ones had their knees in the arch of my back. I've got scars on my wrists. You can maybe see what I'm showing you now. Scars on my, from the way that they put the wire cuffs on and didn't help you up. They pulled you up backwards like animals, ripped my shirt, spitting on my back. I've done a video about this. That was the worst experience at 23, just before I came to Islam. And my whole career, I remember I was in the legal profession. I used to come to your study circles after work in my suit and tie and everything. My career was nearly ruined as a result of that. So this anti-black racism, Abdurrahim, and I'll leave it there for you to come back, because I want to ask you some questions from what you're hearing from me. That anti-black racism that we experienced from white Britain, not on the whole, Because when I went to Roman Catholic school, I was a Roman Catholic like you. After fighting a few battles in school, some of those white colleagues and students became some of my best friends in the school years. And we're still in touch on Facebook and everything like that, because there's a process of engagement and getting to know each other. But I want to stop at this point and come back to you with some questions. When many of us embraced Islam for what it is, the truth, the beauty of it, the multiculturalism. And when I converted in Brixton Mosque, it's the first time I've been to a mosque. That was an amazing experience. But then even more of an amazing experience is when the profound impact, the study circles at your house, when we realized you were having study circles and we came and we saw what we saw. We saw the Sunnah. We saw different colors of brothers and sisters. And for me, I knew from Brixton, but it was reinforced at your home that yes, this is the understanding of Islam, and Islam is the correct religion. What we weren't prepared for, and this is why I want to ask you now, was the anti-black racism that we felt from Muslims, because it was worse to us than the racism we've been facing from white Britain.
I'm really glad you brought that up, bro. Because I do believe that there's quite a lot of brothers, even until today, brothers who, practicing brothers who are, mashallah, how can you say active Islamic activists, and they're in denial about it. I don't think they're racist themselves necessarily, but they are in denial, right, that this attitude exists amongst them. But the interesting thing is this racism, that's the first time I experienced racism, right? But I guess from the point of view of me, from the point of view, it's something I would laugh at. You understand? So I find it amusing. Right. From the point of view, I'm going to be blunt, right? I'm going to be very blunt here, right? You see, the way I was brought up, and I have to say, I was not brought up like this by my dad. My dad, right? He was a person, I never heard anything racist from him ever, right? In fact, the opposite, right? He was a person who, he respected you for what you were. That's it, plain and simple, right? Although he was a colonial administrator, right? In Tanzania, and he must have known what the British were doing to the Mau Mau, which was horrific, horrible stuff, and he was a colonial administrator, so I don't know. Tanzania is maybe different from Kenya, right? But when Tanzania got its independence, and Kenya, they asked my dad to stay on, right? So the person who used to be under him became his boss.
Right? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the person who used to work for my dad became my dad's boss, and my mum would say he would call him sir, right? He would act like just the way that he had acted. Wow. The guy had acted to him, he acted under him, because that's it. He respected his position. You understand? Like he was not, right. I never heard, like my mum was different, I have to say, but so not from my dad. And I think, that how he put something good in me from that perspective, but my upbringing at school, right? And I'm not saying anyone in the school, like the school itself was not like this, because it was run by monks and stuff. I didn't, the monks themselves, I didn't hear anything racist from them, but amongst us, right, the kids at school, there's no doubt there was this, it was open racism, racist jokes, racist attitude, but it wasn't just racism, right? It was this idea of Britain being the best, British supremacy, white supremacy. It was something very, very, very implicit. It was there all the time. We looked down on everybody, right? And that includes not just black people, Pakistanis, anyone, even the French, forget it. Anyone anyone that was not in England, we looked down on them, right? The Americans, we hate the Americans. We used to call the America the colonies. We'd still call them the colonies, right? Okay. So it wasn't a black thing, right? It was just contempt for almost contempt for anything that wasn't, English and British, right? So although I experienced racism, and this is interesting because, they say, as a white person, for you to claim that people are treating you racist means you don't understand what racism is, right? Right. For the position of power, you can't claim that people are being racist to you because you're in the position of power. And it's true. I did experience racism in the Pakistani community. The term they have for gura, right?
Yeah.
Means kafir. When they say it in a certain term, when they say gura, right, and they say it in a certain way, they mean kafir, right? And obviously that's from the day the British ruled India, and gura was synonymous with kafir, right? So I definitely experienced, you know, that racism. You know, when I became Muslim, from the point of view of they look down, but I would just find it amusing because it was like, you know, wait a minute, you know, we British ruled you for 300 years. What are you talking about? You know, like that's just funny that you think you're better than us, right? But it certainly was there, right? There's no doubt. And I remember going into a mosque once, and it was like, so. And I'm not to say this is not a bit hurtful, right? I'm saying, but maybe because of my white privilege, I don't feel it like you feel it. You understand?
Right.
But that doesn't mean I don't feel it. When someone says you can't be a Muslim, you're a gura, right? And that's what a kid said to me. Right? That hurts a bit, right? You know, when people treat you like, no, you're not a Muslim because you're a white man, right? So definitely from my perspective, but I know definitely even more from, for a black person, right? The idea that their daughter would marry a black person, it's, you know, they'd rather their daughter died. Like, you know it, and we know it, bro. What it was like, you know what we went through. And there were so many girls wanting to marry, you know, black guys and vice versa. And you know, the funny thing is that, you know, with white reverts, this sort of thing now, you know, like, yeah, they'd like their daughters almost to marry a white revert, but I'm not so sure that it's moved over to the black reverts, right? You know, the acceptable realm of revert. I still think that our black brothers are still struggling. So, yeah, it's there, bro. It's. I know,
Abdurrahim, you know, this is fascinating because in the time I've known you near enough 30 years, you and I haven't had this conversation to this degree about what you've gone through, and I'm fascinated hearing the hurtfulness, the hurt that you've got from them saying the same thing to you. Obviously, we were receiving that, so to hear this from you is fascinating. And another thing, Abdurrahim, I think that should be highlighted, and I say this, it's as though, and there's a parallel here. You know, when you looked at like white racism, and I'm glad you mentioned the power structure because many people don't get that. What you highlighted, and that's from the structural point of racism. But many would say, they always bring up wanting to marry our women, Pakistani, South Asian women, as if that's
a lot of Pakistani girls want to marry black guys. Just to mention
exactly.
That.
but the point is, as if
no
that's
forcing them here, right?
Exactly, and it's like we are not after your women, but this is a similar parallel with white racist Britons or Americans in that sense, that the fear that they had was, and even that's the slavery time, it was, the black people are highly sexualized, and they knew that maybe their women were interested, or no, they're preying upon our women. We only have to go back to, you may not know that the story of Emmett Till, the young black individual, nearly 100 years ago. He was 14. He went into a shop. All he said was hi to this white woman. She went back to her husband and the brothers and everything, and they beat him to a pulp. Now, the mother of the Emmett Till had an open casket funeral. She wanted people to see what had happened. And it was in 2015 or 2018 that the woman who made this lie, she was on her deathbed, and you can look it up. She's on her deathbed, and she confessed that she had lied and she had guilt all these years, that she'd allowed this lie to result in the death of this 14-year-old boy. And that's the thing that always gets racists, for example, that, they're after our women. Our pure women, they're highly sexualized. And this is an undercurrent that runs in the South Asian community, just like we saw it run in the white community as well. And the fact is, again, we're not after your women, and there's a mutual, not pursuit, but there's a mutual focus from the women. It's about marriage, basically. So what you're saying there, I think, is really, really important. And I'm really glad you've brought this out now. Not so much about anti-black racism, but the fact that you as a white convert from a middle-class background, from a privileged background, would still experience racism from the more predominant community being the South Asian community. And Abdurrahim, so that viewers know, when they think, this is a bashing of South Asians, you were actually the one who conducted my marriage to my, now my ex, but my Pakistani wife. You were the one who conducted that nikah. Mashallah, tabarakallah. I've got 4 daughters from that relationship now, 3 stepchildren. So I'm throwing that in there so that the viewers and the listeners can see, well, hold on a minute. Look, there is a complexity to this. Mashallah, tabarakallah. And when you're looking just at Islam.
I think, one of the things that we should talk about in future podcasts, and it's one of the things to reflect about, those early days, of what it all meant to us, Salafiyah, trying to be upon that way of the Prophet and his companions, and how that impacted on our attitude towards race. I think, look, there was a naivety, but it was very sincere, right? And we were really, really trying to be as much as we could like the Prophet and his companions, and that included, like Abu Dar was ready to put his face on the ground. And when he said to Bilal, you son of a black woman, and it's like the Prophet said, there's still Jahiliyyah in you, and how Abu Dar put his face on the ground and said, I'm not going to move it till you tread on it. So I think I think definitely we wanted to purge all the Jahiliyyah from us. Like, that was a real sincere effort. But listen, here's some things I wanted to talk to you about. Now, these are going to be like, I'm going to, I don't like this phrase, obviously, from an Islamic perspective, but it's our phrase in English, you play the devil's advocate, right?
Yes.
So, but here are some questions that I want to ask you that, like, or some issues I want to discuss that I haven't been able to talk with anyone else. And I'm just saying, because these have arisen recently with everything that's going on, right?
Right.
So I've been watching a few videos and people saying, like white people. So there's a lot of this, like, when you're a black person, a person clutches, when you walk by, right? They'll hold their handbag tight, right? Or they'll put their hand on their pocket to check their wallet or their mobile phone, right? Now, look, I'm going to say something, right? Not in defense of white people, but I'm going to give my perspective, right?
Right.
And I would admit that I do that, but I would not do that with every black person, right? I would do that with a white person or a Pakistani person, or I would do that with a guy who looks like a Hell's Angel, right? The point being is that if I, in my mind, associate a particular look with criminality, right? Or with a threat of violence, I am going to prepare myself for that in whatever way thing. And so that, like that would not necessarily have to do anything with the color of their skin, right? It would not necessarily have to do, like, a person could be white as pasty white. If I was in Liverpool and there was some white guy with a hoodie, right, looking all like this, believe me, I'd do exactly the same thing. It wouldn't be a different reaction, right? If a guy came by walking with a briefcase and a suit and tie and he was black, I wouldn't react like that, right? It's not the person of a colored skin, right? But there's no doubt that, and this goes back to what you were saying, there's no doubt that due to the way that we have been indoctrinated, right, we associate the blackness, right, with criminality, with threats of violence. And there is, can I suggest something that's going to be like, you can shoot me down, right? I don't care, right? Because I think we have to have the conversation, But don't you think that sometimes in some aspects of black culture, there is a glorification of that image of the black man as this extremely powerful, almost militant, strong figure, right? You understand that, like, no one messes with me, no one can mess with me, you mess with me. And like back in the days, bro, like whenever there was trouble, right? It was the Brixton brothers we'd call on to come and, because that was enough, wasn't it? It was just like, you see 10 black faces there and it's like, okay, this is business. Like, we're not going to mess with these guys, right? And even, subhanallah, bro, listen to this interesting thing, even in the time of the Prophet not in the time of the Prophet, but soon after, like, what a lot of people don't know is that most of the soldiers, if not, maybe not most, but many of the soldiers in the armies, the Muslim armies, were Abyssinian, were Habashis. Were Ahbash, right?
Right.
I wrote an article about this back in the days, right? It was refuting some, Christians who were accusing Islam of being, a racist religion, right? and I referenced this point where Christians in Egypt, because the Christians in Egypt were Romans. You have to remember they were actually Romans. Romans had invaded that whole area, right? They weren't black, they were Roman, right?
Yeah.
They were Westerners, right? And they were saying, okay, we'll talk to you Arabs, but these black people, right? We feel nervous around them, right? Because there were so many black people in the Muslim armies, right? They said, these people, you keep them away from us because they make us feel nervous, right?
Right.
So what do you have to say about that, bro? Bro, what do you have to say in respect to that? Is this totally unfair, unjustified? Is it just a product of our brainwashing, or is there something there, right? Is there something?
No, I think you've raised some excellent points, Abdurrahim, and I'll address both of them. I'm seeing our brother who we're going to interview one stage, Ilyas Kermani's come on board. I just want to say salams to our sister Salwa, who comes regularly on the Baker broadcast as well, and some of the brothers that are there, mashallah. So we are seeing your points. But Abdurrahim, the first point, what you've said, I understand what you're saying concerning if you see someone who looks shifty, who looks shady.
Yeah.
I will talk from personal experience. I've been walking down the street on a number of occasions, growing up as a young man in South London, and I would see someone looking in that description, wearing the hoodie, everything like that. And there's a white woman coming up the road, or there's a white guy coming up the road, and I can be following 50 yards behind. I could be wearing my suit because I'm going to work with my briefcase, or I could be wearing just casual. They don't clutch their handbag or their briefcases or put their hands in their pocket when they've walked past this white guy, who I would be wary of walking like, who's this guy in the hoodie? He doesn't look, I'm going to keep my distance from him. They wouldn't do it, but when they come to, as soon as he's passed, not only would they clutch their handbag under their arm or put their hands in their pocket, they would walk into the middle of the road, regardless of the car or not is coming, and they will continue to walk in the road until they've passed me. Then they will come back onto my side of the pavement, or they would move on to the other side of the road, and they'd be looking at me very warily to make sure that if he sees that I'm doing this, he may come and harm me. And it got to the stage, Abdurrahim, that when they did this, I would say to them, I'm not going to touch you. I've never robbed. I've never harmed. And I'd be having that conversation as they're walking past. And you can see they're a bit more embarrassed and afraid, and they keep their head down. But that was insulting to go through that daily. You're walking down the road and you see an individual and people are walking past them, more shady looking than you, if you like. And they crossing into the middle of the road and walking past. So there's that issue. Now, coming to the second point that you spoke to.
It's real. I mean, it's the problem is, we as human beings, we often tend to judge people, everything by our own experiences. You understand? So you think, well, because I'm like that, everyone else must be like that as well. But it's clearly not the case, right? It's clearly not the case. Yeah.
But speaking to the issue of the impression of the black man with strength, power, and everything like that. Yes, that is an impression that is there now. But Abdurrahim, I think about why we've become like that. When we've got this stereotype of violence, for example, on us, who has been the most violent of ethnicities for centuries? It's been the white race. Look at what they've done to us in slavery. Look at the brutality right up to George Floyd and what's been happening with the arrests. Who are the ones enacting violence? Now, what will be the response and the defense mechanism and the default mechanism that comes in? There's going to be that resilience. There's going to be that imagery of violence that if you mess about with me, you will meet violence. Okay. Yeah. And that has been an impression and a persona that has been put around us as a protective shell. Yes, we have become like that because it's a product of of the environment that we live in. Now, think about it. Had black people been like that, okay, in the impression that they've got now, would the transatlantic slavery have been able to take place? They would never have been able to come in and invade and conquer. As you know, the indigenous peoples around the world were welcoming. That was their nature when they saw the people of difference come into them. And it was those people of difference who then inflicted the most barbaric type of violence that has been perpetuated for centuries. And we still see that in wars across the world with some of the so-called superpowers today. So that impression is one that's there's legitimacy to it to an extent, but that is a default development for self-preservation. And that's why we, apart other than Allah preserving us, but that's why we in part are still here today, kicking against the system, because there is a power there.
Bro, something, right? I'm going to throw something really.
please do.
I'm going to throw something in here. Is this maybe just like some cyclical karma of history, right? And I mean karma in the sense, I know karma is a Hindu concept, but I think when you break it down and you look like at the basic principle, it's just basically what goes around comes around, right?
Right.
It seems to me, right, a sunnah, right? It's what Allah has put in this creation, right? Yes. It's like, subhanallah, of course, it doesn't happen in a precise measure, but it happens in a general way, right? So let's go back in history a bit, bro, because there was a time when white people lived in pretty much terror of black people, right?
Yeah.
So you go back to the time of the Barbary pirates, for example, right?
Absolutely.
They were raiding the whole of the French and Spanish and Cornwall and English coast, and
exactly.
They estimate that 1.5 million Europeans were taken into slavery into Africa, right, yes, by Muslims, right? But interestingly enough, I read somewhere that when some of the English people tried to go to Morocco, well, it wasn't Morocco then, whatever it was called at that time, right? And they wanted to ransom the white slaves. The white slaves didn't want to go back because
right,
their life in England was worse, free, than it was being a slave in the Muslim lands. But I think, the point is that all I'm trying to say is that it's not an issue of the color of their skin. I don't think it's anything to do. I don't think there's any fundamental genetic disposition to any one particular race of people, right? And this is something I like. This is, I believe, from a scientific basis, right? And I am absolutely not saying this in order to deny the experience of racism by black people. So what I'm going to say now is not denying that. That is 100% real. I have seen it. I have experienced it. Like I said, when we began this, we began this conversation, we began with what? A story where I experienced it with you, right? And it was like this mind-opening thing for me, right?
Right.
But however, from a genetic, biological, scientific position, race is rubbish. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist, right?
Absolutely.
So the genetic differences, right, between me and, the genetic variation between you and another black person is probably more between me and you.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this thing of
genetically, there's no inbuilt difference between you and me, right? The difference is the environment and the power structures and the indoctrinations, that we have, been put through. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no one is born, like a Jew or a Christian or Zoroastrian, right? It's your parents, it's your environment that makes you, takes you away from that fitrah. And like they say, kids don't see color. They don't see it. You see these kids playing, they do not see it at all, right? They don't even see it. It's something that someone puts in your head, bro.
That's right. And I think touching on that, as you said, when we look at the origin of the word slave, it comes from the term Slavs. Okay, which were slave. Then also what you said about the Bible,
the Slavs were slaves to the Romans. Yes,
exactly. And then when you look at the Barbary slavery, what you're talking about, for those who are interested, there's a very good book. It's a biographical account of Thomas Pellow, a white Briton who was enslaved, white gold. The book is called White Gold, and it speaks to exactly what you're saying. They were coming into the west coast of England, Cornwall, and they were basically just literally landing and enslaving white Britons, taking them back to what is now Morocco. So you're absolutely right there. So I think we need to get a context when we're speaking about slavery. The most barbaric and brutal, I think, undoubtedly was what we saw with the transatlantic slavery. I think that's very clear. But as you said, Abdurrahim,
it had a racist element. There is no doubt. You see, this is the thing, is that one thing is that the Muslim slavery is never a racist thing. It was never to do with race. And I don't think, it was never to do with the color of a person's skin. Right. So, in the time of the Prophet, there were Arabs who were slaves to other Arabs. Right. It wasn't anything.
Romans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but I think what is, maybe I won't say it's unique in history, only Allah knows best, right? But what was particularly, and still is particularly insidious, right, about the Western slavery, what happened in America, it was race. It was based on race. It was justified by a racist reading of biblical texts,
right?
Where they actually
eugenics came about as a result of that, and so black became a term to commodify us.
Yeah,
and by it became a term. So we became commodified by the term black, and that name stuck. And okay, we've taken ownership of that. But you're absolutely right in the context, and that's why the beauty of Islam. When I became a Muslim, having been a Roman Catholic, you were a Roman Catholic. I went to Roman Catholic school in Wimbledon. They took me out of the urban school because of the violence. I was always fighting. I went to this school, culture shock, being the only black guy in my class. But learning about Catholicism and then seeing how the Bible, as you've highlighted there, was used, the story of Ham and everything like this. And then when you see Islam, when we see the story of Iblis, when we see the xenophobia and the where that cause of difference came about and how insidious, as you've rightly said, it was. For me, when I saw Islam, I looked very carefully at these elements here. And that's why I'm still very firm on this deen, love this deen as you do. And that's why I speak to the Arab communities, the South Asian communities, to say, hold on a minute. Why have you got so steeped amongst yourselves anti-black, anti-white racism when you have the Kitab Allah, you have the Book of Allah?
They've abandoned it, bro. That's why, isn't it? We know it.
Exactly.
That's reality, and that's why the whole the whole world is a mess right now.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the Arabs, bro. I used to say this. I used to say this, bro, when I was giving dawah back in the days. Right. Like as long as they hang on to their Arab nationalism, Allah will keep humiliating them. Right. Yes. And the more they hang on to it, the more humiliation they will get. Right.
And I'm going to do something here. I'm going to do something here.
The Arabs before Islam, the most horrific nation on earth, who used to bury their daughters alive.
Right.
SubhanAllah. Right. That. The only thing that gave them anything was Islam. What is there to be proud of? SubhanAllah, this whole thing, this pride in your tribe and your race and your, like I can understand, you love your home. I can understand that. I can love, I love England. I love it. I love England. I love my country.
Beautiful. We have a pride, a permissive pride.
That's it,
Yeah. But Raheem, on that point now, I'm going to do an Eamon. Some will see my age at Asian. I'm going to do an Eamon Andrews. This is your life moment. Okay.
Wrap it up after this, bro, because there's so much more to talk about.
There is.
Tune in next week. Some more.
If you remember when we did, we had our organization Al Ansar in the 90s.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Do our activity report, and this speaks exactly. I'm going to show you this here. Okay. Right here is the report. This is
presentation, bro.
That's
bro.
That's your right. Exactly. Look. Right. So that was
you better hide it, bro.
On Friday, the 16th of October, 1998, you delivered a lecture in Call to Islam in East Ham, and it was on Islamophobia, but also the impatience of dawah. Now, this sums it up really nicely, because what you spoke about here, your note.
It's the importance of dawah, bro. It's my terrible right.
Right, yeah, the importance of dawah. Sorry, the importance of that. But what you mentioned to 150 Muslims who attended on this occasion, you mentioned Islamophobia in the West is of two types. But you also spoke about those, but then you also spoke about what we need to do as Muslims, and you said that we need to be upon truth and good manners and character. But we today do not have this. We need to reform ourselves, learn the religion. And first, that's the first step in the right direction. And I think that that's a good way to conclude. That was 1998. Now, you spoke about Islamophobia, but you said, what do we need to do? And I think it's a good way to conclude for tonight on we do need to be introspective. And again, there's an appeal to, and I want to say what I've said previously, just like we saw an established nation of Abyssinia take in a fledgling set of Muslims when the Prophet ﷺ said, go to Abyssinia to do the first hijrah. Okay. That was an established nation. It was a black nation. and they took them in, protected them, afforded them security, and freedom to practice their religion. Now, South Asians, Arabs, you should reciprocate that, because at this time now, Black Muslims, Black minorities, and the non-Muslims from the Black communities are in need of some solidarity and some refuge amongst an established people. And they need to get rid of this anti-Black racism and this anti-white racism. I will use that term now from the experiences that you and undoubtedly other white converts have gone through. And they need to embrace us completely. They need to understand that we are an intrinsic part of them. And those who are not Muslims are in need of the purity and the call to Islam, which is free. As you mentioned, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last sermon, that a white is not superior to a black is not superior, Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, and vice versa. We need to stop using these as empty slogans, and we need to start really enacting them, inshallah.
Yeah, that's a good place to end, bro. What can you add to that?
I'm glad, Abdurrahim, I'm really pleased. This is the first time you and I have done with double build since I think 1998. And I've really enjoyed it. And we've spoken about stuff we haven't spoken about previously, which you brought that experience to me, which I remember it very well. It was a good place to start, mashallah. So to all our viewers, I hope they've found it engaging. And yes, next week, same time, A Piece of Cake, the Green and Baker podcast. He's Abdurrahim Green, Anthony.
That's Abdul Haq Baker.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.